Atlanta is one of the fastest-growing cities in the United States. Since 1960, the metro region has grown from under 800,000 to over 6.2 million, an eightfold increase. By 2050, that number is expected to reach 8 million. One thing that has not kept up with the city's growth is its dismal transit infrastructure. Instead, Atlanta has become a commuting nightmare, with studies ranking it as the riskiest city for drivers and the third most congested in the nation. By 1998, this had caused so much air pollution that Atlanta failed to meet minimum standards for air quality, leading to a total freeze of federal transportation funding. In the nearly 30 years since, little has changed. The American Lung Association gave Atlanta a resounding F for smog in 2025. Yet despite the dangerous roads, endless traffic, and poisoning of the air, Atlantans continue to shun public transit.
It's just an objective observation that the statistics bear it out. I mean, census reports say that only about 2 to 3% of Fulton County residents ever ride rail to work.
The Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, or MARTA, continues to see its use decline year over year, with just a paltry 64 million trips in 2024, a fraction of ridership in similarly sized cities. Only 1.5% of commuters use public transportation to get to work in 2023, opting instead to sit in an average of 32 minutes of traffic each way. How did it get to this point? Why is so little being done about it? And why do so many people oppose expanding public transit? In order to answer that, it's best to start from the very beginning. "1959 is a good place to start. Following in the wake of the Montgomery bus boycott, Reverend William Holmes Borders and other community leaders succeeded in challenging Atlanta's segregated buses. However, white ridership plummeted almost immediately, as many white Atlantans refused to use the newly integrated buses. In fact, many refused to live in an integrated city at all. The next 2 decades saw a massive wave of white flight, with over half of Atlanta's white population hastily moving out to the suburbs north of the city.
Well, I hate to leave, really, but I feel like that I'm out of place, living in this community.
A lot of people who are trying to stop the so-called white exodus to the suburbs say that their biggest problem is changing the attitudes of the people. Do you feel that your attitude could be changed to make you want to stay here and live among blacks?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not prejudiced. I just as soon, live here as live anywhere else. But I don't want to be the only white family living here. You see what I mean?
This racist backlash was the backdrop for MARTA's initial planning in the 1960s. When it first came to a vote in 1965, the 96% white suburbs of Cobb County refused participation. Later, in the 1971 referendum on funding and implementation, Clayton and Gwinnett counties, both of which were 95% white, also withdrew from MARTA. None of the white suburbs would participate in the system, leaving only the majority black areas of Fulton and DeKalb. This is the root of MARTA's failure. What resulted was a transit system that existed as a closed loop within black areas of the city, deliberately cutting off its users from the suburbs.
The suburban counties created their own separate and unequal suburban transit systems, bus systems, to keep from being part of MARTA, because MARTA was perceived as being black, and they didn't want any part of it.
In the decades following, economic development centered on those areas, particularly in the North Atlanta metro. Black Atlantans without vehicles, accounting for an estimated 10% of all black households, were excluded from all those jobs and opportunities. Moreover, the MARTA board broke many of its key promises, especially those made to the black community.
It is a gimmick to fool the poor people. It is also clearly understood that the powers of the 10-man committee of MARTA has unlimited power. MARTA does not include a single grassroots poor black or white bus ride.
One was to pass a zoning reform that restricted high-density development to the areas along newly constructed rail lines.
Rapid transit will change the pattern of development that we have in the metropolitan area.
Given Atlanta's sprawl, this would justify the investment in rail, encouraging revitalization of those areas and bringing in new jobs. Instead, planners caved to pressure from the business community, who opposed any such restrictions.
Completely unrealistic in a free and open economy, society that we have. We cannot slow the growth. We just have to find ways to accommodate to the growth.
The result was that high-paying office jobs proliferated out into the northern suburbs, where office space was cheaper. Another point of contention was service to Atlanta's public housing developments, whose residents had the greatest need for public transportation. In particular, prior to the referendum, MARTA authorities promised to extend rail service to Perry Homes, an isolated project home to 3,000 people in desperate need of access to urban services. After winning enough support to pass in Fulton and DeKalb, these promises were promptly ignored for over a decade.
There is no justification for building 5 points north to Doraville before we build Perry Homes and 5 points south to the airport first. But Perry Homes has got to be in there. I think, therefore, the action the MARTA board took today was a real signal that the people of Atlanta effectively have been left out of the equation insofar as serious decisions by this authority, which is not accountable to the voters, is concerned.
They made the same promise during MARTA's 1985 expansion, before promptly breaking it again. By the time of Perry Homes' demolition in 1999, they were still without transit service. Let's jump to the present day. Atlanta's present gridlock nightmare stems from the forced decoupling of the suburbs from the city. The white and wealthy suburbs exist in a parasitic relationship with the urban core. They cannot possibly exist in their walled garden of detached, single-family homes without depending on the city for jobs and services. As such, they commute in by day, causing congestion and pollution, and then leave at night to return to their isolated communities. Despite all the sitting in traffic that this entails, many people seem happy to make that trade-off if it means living in a whites-only neighborhood. Dr. Jason Henderson of San Francisco State University refers to this phenomenon as secessionist automobility. In his words, automobility enabled physical secession to outer suburban areas while simultaneously providing a means of travel through spaces inhabited by blacks, all without having to interact with blacks. MARTA did have two promising developments in the 2010s. First, Clayton County voted in 2014 to join the Metropolitan Transit System. This begins to repair the damage done by the original secession of Clayton, Cobb, and Gwinnett counties from MARTA. However, it should be noted that this does little to alleviate Atlanta's transit segregation. Clayton County was one of the areas most intensely affected by white flight. In 1965, it was 95% white. Now, the area is 73% black. White suburbs continued to vote down initiatives for joining MARTA. Both Cobb and Gwinnett counties rejected ballot referendums this past November with overwhelming margins. To make matters worse, MARTA authorities have already begun walking back promises made to the people of Clayton County. The proposed commuter rail line was scrapped in 2022, despite Clayton residents approving a sales tax increase based on the promise that 50% would go towards rail investment. The long tradition of broken promises continues, and if nothing is done, more may be on the way. The other important development of the 2010s was the adoption of the More MARTA plan in 2016, for which voters approved a $2.6 billion investment over 40 years. It has now been nearly a decade with almost nothing to show for it. The program contained 70 proposed improvements, of which 17 were chosen as priority projects. Only one, the bus route in Summerhill, has even broken ground. MARTA has also begun rolling back its promises in its usual fashion. First, they announced the scrapping of 2 light rail extensions in favor of more bus routes. Then, the MARTA board indicated that it was expecting a budget shortfall and had decided to only, quote, actively pursue 9 of the 17 projects, not even naming which 9. Of all the rail projects, the only one that could feasibly be completed this decade is the Eastside Trail streetcar extension. However, despite having already completed all pre-planning, investing over $20 million to date, and having set aside $230 million for construction, on March 13, 2025, Mayor Andre Dickens pulled support for the project, which was slated to break ground later this year. He claims to want to prioritize an extension to the Southside Trail, for which pre-planning work has not yet begun. This process took 8 years for the Eastside Trail. Notably, this announcement came 2 days after the mayor launched his re-election campaign. Business elites in the Eastside have expressed opposition to the extension, unwilling to tolerate the temporary disruptions brought by construction. Clearly, the mayor seems to be caving to special interests to further his re-election campaign, throwing Atlantans under the bus. This is currently the most pressing fight in Atlanta transit. If the mayor has his way, and the project is scrapped for political reasons despite being completely ready to go, transit in Atlanta will be set back decades. If you care about equity, the environment, the city of Atlanta, or even if you just hate traffic, then now is the time to push for a better future for our city. Call the mayor's office, attend city council meetings, and spread the word about the fight for a connected Atlanta.
Traffic is growing at an alarming rate in metro Atlanta. Along with congestion of our roads, this growth also impacts our air quality. Atlanta's ozone level is one of the highest in the nation, and the metro area's share of federal transportation funds are limited to projects that can be shown not to increase air pollution. We must take steps to clean up our air. One area of severe traffic congestion is the corridor between South DeKalb and the MARTA Lindbergh station, specifically along Lindbergh Drive, La Vista Road, Briarcliff Road, Clifton Road, and Candler Road. Increases in population, employment, and business development along this corridor have added to traffic congestion. As the growth continues, the traffic congestion and the resulting pollution will worsen unless steps are taken to provide alternative modes of transportation. One such mode of transportation being considered for this corridor is light rail. Light rail is different from...